Upon hearing that a New Yorker is hit by a car once every 20 minutes, the listener replied, "Gee, he must get awfully tired of that." Bad logic like this may be all right for jokes, but such reasoning has also become commonplace when deep thinkers start talking about social policy. We hear so much about the poor, the unemployed, the homeless, but the poor are not a class of people doomed to a certain fate. Just as it is not the same New Yorker who gets hit by a car every 20 minutes, it is not the same people who fall into the poor bracket every year. Nearly half the people who are poor one year are out of the poverty bracket the following year. Many get out in a few months. The unemployed, the homeless, and people on welfare also have considerable turnover. Misfortunes strike people, but most of them don't just lie there. The statistics we hear thrown around by deep thinkers and moralizers do not represent permanent classes of people. Being poor is not like being left-handed or brown-eyed. You are not that way for life. Nothing is set in concrete, especially not in the United States. This is true of the upper income brackets as well. Half the people in the top 20% of income earners one year are not there just a few years later, and most of their adult offspring are not in the top 20%. Many of the income differences that our deep thinkers wring their hands about are connected with age. Young people who are just starting to work don't usually earn nearly as much as people with 20 years of experience behind them. Income differences between the middle-aged and the young are greater than income differences between blacks and whites. It's just that no one notices these differences. The constant cries about income inequalities, disparities, and inequities ignore great differences among the people involved. A young fellow in his 20s may be making half the income of his father, but is that an injustice? Do we need a government program to rush to the aid of this young man, who will also inevitably be an older man someday? He may already be able to afford some luxuries that his father cannot afford because his father has heavier responsibilities, like putting kids through college or preparing for his own retirement. Deep thinkers don't want to be distracted by these kinds of details. To them, the big thing is that the numbers don't look equal on paper. This gives them an opportunity to strike moral poses and denounce American society, the grubby details they leave to others. The media adds to the confusion. It can also find someone to put on television to represent the poor. The more heart-rending the predicament, the better for TV ratings. Truth and balance are lost in the shuffle. Reckless crusades are the lifeblood of journalism. Anthony Trollope wrote a novel about it more than 100 years ago, so it's not a new thing. What is new is that television gives a sense of immediacy and reality to half-baked notions and brings it all into millions of homes every night under the label of news. True poverty, homelessness, and hunger are painful. I can assure you of that from personal experience. But the answer is not to sanctify poverty or to denounce those who have stayed out of poverty. Poverty is not to be made a career, either for those who are in it or those who administer programs for the poor. The answer to poverty is prosperity, not being maudlin to those who fall into the category of the poor at a given moment. The welfare state and the taxes required to support it stifle the very creation of jobs that are needed to provide opportunities to escape poverty. European welfare states have gone much further than the United States. Recently, Europeans have begun to express surprise that they are not nearly as successful at creating jobs as those heartless Americans. Maybe some of our own deep thinkers ought to take notice. The only way the government can create jobs is by taking resources from the private sector. That means fewer jobs in the private sector. That is no answer to unemployment. All it does is let politicians look like benefactors, when in fact they are making things worse.